He bought an old cabin for 50 cents, then found a shackled bride hidden beneath the hay. Duskwood, Montana Territory, autumn 1881. The heavens over the rugged settlement of Duskwood held the crisp, piercing brightness of an initial chill. Withered foliage skittered over the town hall's stairs, where a small group of locals clustered, their postures bent against the biting gusts. A timber placard groaned on corroded pivots above the bidder's platform, and before it, Darius Kane straightened the neckline of his jacket and advanced. The bid caller coughed to clear his voice, casting a wary eye over the assembled onlookers. Coming next, the homestead and dozen acres along Bitter Creek Trail, complete with a spring and livestock pen, starting off for $50. A quietude built not born of apathy but of apprehension. Darius lifted one leather-clad palm. $50. He anticipated the usual echo of a rival proposal. None came. The bid caller fidgeted, scanning the expressions in the throng. Nobody returned his gaze. The villagers fixed their stares, not on the property in question, but upon Darius himself. Several averted their eyes hastily, a few with unease, yet a couple with an emotion more profound. Compassion. Going once, the bid caller announced with reluctance. Marcus. A lanky fellow toward the rear grumbled a phrase. The lady next to him wagged her head in denial. Going twice, the bid caller continued, his utterance landing without impact. Elderly Willa Blaine moved ahead, drawing her wrap snug. She inclined toward Darius with an expression that sent a shiver through him, sharper than the alpine breeze. "You oughtn't claim that spot, young man," she murmured. "Believe me!" Ere he could respond, the mallet struck with the sharpness of a gunshot, awarded to the fellow in the tan overcoat, and just like that, the crowd began to disperse too quickly, too quietly. Darius took the folded deed from the auctioneer's trembling hand. "Is there something I should know?" The man said nothing, just nodded once curtly, then turned away. He mounted his horse and rode toward the ridge. The trail to the cabin was overgrown, untouched for years. Pines whispered overhead as the wind pushed through the trees like something searching. Darius passed a half-fallen fence and a rusted sign that read Bellamy. He dismounted at the edge of the clearing. The cabin stood hunched and weary at the far side of the land. Logs darkened by rain and sun, roof sagging. The well was still there, the corral, too, overrun with weeds, but solid. It was more than worth 50 cents. He took a slow breath and approached the cabin. Inside was empty, thick with dust. A layer of silence coated everything like it had been waiting. Darius walked through, inspecting the walls, tapping the floor with his boot. Then a sound, a faint rustle from outside the barn. The wooden door creaked as he pushed it open. Shafts of light pierced through the warped slats, landing on piles of hay, matted and yellow. It smelled of age, of rot, and something else. Something bitter, human. The rustle again. He stepped forward, parting the hay with his boot. Beneath it, something moved. He dropped to his knees, hands pushing the hay aside, until he saw a woman, thin, filthy, shackled at the ankle with an iron chain bolted to a post. She flinched away from the light from him, hands trembling as she tried to cover herself. "No, no, not again," she gasped. "Please, not again." Her voice was raw, like it hadn't been used in weeks or years. Darius froze. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, calmly, holding up both hands. "I swear it." She didn't believe him. Her body curled tighter, eyes wild. Her wrists were bruised, her hair tangled with straw. "You're not him. You're not the new one." "I don't know who you mean," he said softly, "but I'm getting you out of here." He unfastened his coat and knelt beside her slowly, letting her see every movement. She shrank back but didn't scream. He pulled a canteen from his belt and unscrewed it. "Drink," he said, holding it out. She hesitated, then snatched it, spilling half of it down her chin. He saw the way her hands shook, how her eyes darted to the barn door like she was waiting for someone else to enter, someone worse. The lock on the shackle was rusted but old. Darius pulled a small tool from his boot and began working. She flinched when he touched the metal near her ankle. "Easy," he murmured. "I'm not going to chain you again." After 2 minutes, the shackle clicked open. The chain clattered to the floor. The woman whimpered once and fell against the wall. Her breath came in sharp gasps. "I've got a horse," Darius said. "You can ride. I'll walk beside you. You don't have to talk." She looked up at him just for a moment, and in her eyes was a mix of disbelief, pain, and the kind of hope that hurt worse than fear. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. When she couldn't stand, he lifted her gently, careful not to meet her eyes, and carried her outside. Not a word passed between them on the walk back, but the sound of chains dragging behind them was finally gone. The fire crackled gently in the hearth as dusk settled over the hills outside. Darius Kane sat silently on the edge of a wooden chair in his small cabin, watching the woman sleep. She was no longer shackled, but her body bore the memory of it. Her wrists raw and bruised, her cheekbones sunken, even wrapped in his coat. She looked like someone who had survived a slow eraser. When she had fainted in his arms back at the barn, he had carried her with care down the trail, across the ridge, and into his home. Now she lay on his cot beneath 2 wool blankets, motionless except for the fluttering of her breath. He had not asked her name, had not tried to. It didn't seem right. Instead, he'd gone to work. Water boiled on a stove. A cloth soaked in warm herbs broth rested on her forehead. A tin bowl of oat porridge sat nearby, barely touched. Darius moved slowly in the space, every step deliberate and quiet, as if any sound might snap the thin thread holding her to the world. Hours passed. Outside, wolves howled in the distance. Inside, the only movement came from the flicker of the fire and the rise and fall of her chest. When she finally stirred, it was sudden. Her eyes shot open, wild, Herbity recoiling from the warmth like it burned. "No, no, don't touch me," she gasped. Darius stood quickly and backed away, hands raised. "You're safe," he said softly. "No one will hurt you here." Her chest heaved. She searched the cabin, scanning the walls, the door, the window. Then she saw him. Really saw him standing still as stone, arms open, face calm. "You're not one of them." "No," he said. "I don't even know who them is." Her lip trembled. She gripped the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I found you by accident," Darius continued, his voice like warm iron. "In that barn. I was looking for broken boards. Not you." The woman looked down at her hands like she had only just realized they were free. Then at her ankle. "No chain." She said nothing. "I made porridge," Darius offered. "It's not much, but it's warm." He pushed the bowl a little closer on the table. Still, she didn't move. So he turned away and busied himself by the stove, letting her have the room, the silence, the time. 10 minutes later, he heard the clink of the spoon. She ate in small, nervous bites, watching him with every movement. Darius said nothing more, just continued stirring the fire, his broad back turned. By morning, she was gone from the cot. Not far, just sitting near the window, the coat still wrapped tight. The bowl was empty, her hair still a mess of knots and straw. "You didn't ask my name?" she said quietly. "Wait, didn't seem like the first thing you'd want to give away." She stared at him as if trying to make sense of the strange kindness. "Evelyn," she said after a moment. "My name is Evelyn Bellamy," Darius nodded. "I'm Tarius." He offered a small smile, and though her lips didn't move, her eyes softened just slightly. That afternoon, she insisted on washing the dishes from the night before. Her hands were unsteady, and the basin splashed more water onto the floor than the plates, but she kept going. Later, she asked for thread. She found one of his shirts with a ripped cuff and began sewing slow and clumsy. "These seams are crooked," she muttered. "They're better than mine," Darius said, trying not to smile. Bit by bit, Evelyn moved through the cabin like a shadow, finding its shape. She swept the floor, boiled water, mended a second shirt. Each small act, not just a task, but a statement. "I'm still here. I'm still someone," and Darius, for all his quiet, saw it. He noticed how she folded the dishcloth neatly when finished, how she flinched less when the door opened, how she sat a little straighter as the fire grew warmer. He said nothing of the past, made no inquiries, and for that, Evelyn watched him with something close to disbelief. Nobody had touched her in years without wanting something, but Darius Kane had only handed her a blanket and made her feel for the first time in a very long time like a human being again. Duskwood was a small town, but its whispers traveled fast. By the end of the week, folks knew that Darius Kane wasn't living alone anymore, that he'd brought a girl, thin, pale, too young to be his wife and too scared to be his kin, into that old forge of his. The rumors started slow, like smoke curling under a door. Then they spread. She's probably some runaway. Heard he found her chained up. Maybe she liked it. A woman like that don't just appear unless she's hiding from something worse. Evelyn heard them, even if they were murmured behind hands. She heard them in the dry rasp of the shopkeeper's voice when he refused to meet her eyes, in the way the preacher's wife pulled her child behind her skirts when they passed on the boardwalk, in the dead silence that followed her steps in the general store. So she stopped going into town. Instead, she stayed close to the forge. She cooked, swept, mended whatever needed mending. She read the old books Darius had kept in a trunk, mostly Western tales and war accounts, and learned how to keep the fire alive in the hearth while he worked the anvil out back. But Darius noticed the way her eyes dulled when she glanced out the window toward the town. He didn't say anything until one morning when he found her standing motionless by the sink, fingers white around the dishcloth. "What are they saying?" she asked, voice like sandpaper. Darius didn't look up from the horseshoe he was shaping. "Doesn't matter." "It does to me," he sighed, set the iron down, wiped his hands. "They're cowards, Evelyn. Same ones who looked away when your family disappeared. Same ones who watched Ryston rise without asking why." She said nothing. Her lips pressed tight. That afternoon, he asked her to come into town with him to help carry nails and kerosene. She hesitated, then nodded. They walked side by side through the market street. People turned to stare. A woman on the porch of the saloon leaned in and whispered something to her friend. Laughter followed. Evelyn lowered her eyes. Then a voice rang out sharp, mocking. "Well, I'll be." Darius Kane finally got himself a Damos. Darius stopped. The street went still. The speaker, a broad-shouldered ranch hand named Ty Booker, leaned against the post outside the saloon. He was grinning, boots crossed, drink in hand. Evelyn's fingers clenched around the basket of nails. Her knuckles showed white. Ty whistled low. "Ain't she the one locked up in that old barn? Arston's little mistake." Evelyn turned away. Darius moved. Before Ty could blink, Darius's fist caught him across the mouth. The ranch hand staggered back, hit the post, dropped his drink. "You son of a," Ty lunged. The two men crashed into the dust, fists flying. Darius landed another blow before Ty shoved him into a barrel, splitting Darius's cheek. Blood dripped, but he didn't stop. He tackled Ty to the ground, pinned him, fist raised. "Darius," Evelyn cried. He froze. The whole street watched now. Men on porches, women with children clutched close. A deputy stood by the corner, hand on his gun, unsure whether to step in. Darius got off Ty slowly, breathing hard. His knuckles bled, his shirt was torn. He turned to the crowd. "She's more woman than any of you cowards," he growled. Silence. He walked back to Evelyn, took the basket from her trembling hands. "Come on," he said, voice calm again. "We're done here." They walked back up the street side by side. No one dared speak. That night, Evelyn cleaned his wounds in silence. Her fingers were gentle, her touch sure. "Where did you fight him?" she asked, dabbing at the blood on his brow. "Because no one else ever did for you." She looked at him. "Really?" Looked at him. "I don't understand you," she said quietly. "You don't have to," Darius replied. "Just know you're not alone." He turned away, blinking fast. The forge fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, duskwood was quiet. But inside that small cabin, Evelyn felt something shift. For the first time in years, someone had chosen her, and this time they hadn't asked for anything in return. The air inside the old cabin was colder than usual that morning. Darius had ridden into town before dawn, leaving Evelyn alone. She had asked to stay. Something about the place called to her. Not the dust, not the silence, but the splinters of memory hiding between the floorboards. She moved carefully through the single-room cabin. The floor creaked beneath her bare feet. Her eyes scanned the warped wooden walls, the faded curtains, the soot-darkened hearth. Then she saw it. A single floorboard near the back wall, slightly raised, misaligned from the others. Not enough to trip over, but enough to notice if you were looking. She knelt, fingers brushing over the edge. The wood felt older here, warmer. Evelyn exhaled slowly and reached beneath the nearby bed frame. Her hand found a loose nail, rusted and bent. She used it to pry at the edge of the board. The nails resisted at first, then gave way with a hollow groan. Underneath, wrapped in old cloth, lay a leather-bound journal and a tightly rolled map. Dust clung to them like secrets. She lifted them out, heart hammering. The map unrolled with a dry crackle. It was her family's property, Bellamy Ranch, marked in fine ink with clear boundary lines. But a second set of lines had been drawn in red, overlapping the first. One name was scrolled beside it. Rustin Evelyn's breath caught. She opened the journal with trembling hands. It was hers. She recognized her own writing. The last entry was dated just before she vanished. He says he loves me, says we'll marry in spring, but he wants the land signed over to him first. He says it's just formality, but something feels wrong. Mama's been sick. The maid is gone. I don't know who to trust. Her fingers flipped faster now. Today I saw a doctor I've never met. He said I was hysterical, that I needed rest, confinement, but I never asked for a doctor. Harston said he'd take care of everything, said I needed to calm down, but I saw the papers. He forged Mama's signature. He's selling off parcels. My land, I'm scared. I'm going to hide these notes. If something happens to me, someone needs to know the truth. Evelyn's hands shook, her throat burned. Rustin had promised marriage. Then he had declared her insane. He hadn't just betrayed her, he had erased her. She stood slowly, the journal clutched to her chest. Then she saw something else tucked beneath a loose board at the edge of the hearth. A bundle of letters tied with faded red ribbon. She opened one. My dearest Evelyn, I promise you'll have your land, your name, your future. Just give me time, trust me. Forever yours. Yeah, the handwriting was elegant. Thales were worse. Darius found her there when he returned, sitting in the center of the cabin with the journal in her lap, surrounded by open letters. I found everything, she whispered. He lied. He forged the sale, had me declared insane. Hid the doctor. Took the land. Darius crouched beside her. He didn't ask questions, but he did pick up one letter. Read it. His jaw tightened. We need to get this into the right hands, he said. But as they stepped outside, Darius stopped cold. The hair on the back of his neck rose. Then he heard it. Hoof beatats. Too soft for townfolk. Too careful. Get inside, he said sharply. Before Evelyn could speak, a gunshot rang out. Bark splintered above her head. Darius shoved her down behind the water trough, drew his revolver, and ducked low. From the treine, a shadow moved. He fired once, missed. The rider turned and bolted, galloping back toward the ridge. Silence fell again, sharp and unnatural. Evelyn crawled out wide-eyed. Someone's watching this place. Darius stood, his face hard. Has been for a long time. He walked toward the edge of the trees where the shooter had vanished. Fresh tracks, a broken twig, not an ambush, a warning. Someone knew what was hidden under that cabin floor, and they didn't want it found. Evelyn watched Darius as he returned, dust on his boots, fury in his eyes. They never stopped watching, did they? She whispered. Darius looked at her. No, and they'll come back. Evelyn's grip tightened around the journal. Then we make sure they have something worth fearing. The night was quiet. The kind of quiet that felt older than words, deep and heavy, like the mountains themselves were holding their breath. A small fire crackled outside the forge cabin just beyond the treine. Darius sat on one side, sharpening a broken horseshoe. Evelyn sat across from him, knees drawn to her chest, wrapped in one of his old wool coats. Neither had spoken much since the gunshot at the cabin. The journal now lay in a tin box under the floor of Darius's forge, guarded by 2 locks and a loaded rifle, but the weight of what they'd uncovered still clung to them. Elin stared into the flames. Her voice, when it finally came, was soft, trembling. I was 20, she began. It was spring. I just learned enough of my father's books to realize the land deeds had changed hands. He didn't look at him. My mother, she wasn't well. I'd found her coughing blood after a visit from Rustin's doctor. The maid disappeared the next day. Darius stopped sharpening but said nothing. He let her speak. I told Rolston I'd go public. I said I'd bring the deeds to the magistrate. She looked up at the stars, blinking hard. The next day they said I'd run away, eloped with a stable boy. The papers printed it. My name, my shame. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. They didn't just lock me up, Darius. They erased me. Darius set the horseshoe down. Slowly, he reached across the fire and held out a clean cloth. Your hand, he said. Evelyn looked down. A thin cut ran across her palm from earlier. She hadn't even noticed. She hesitated, then reached across. His hand was warm, calloused from years of work. He dipped the cloth in a bowl of warm water, cleaned the wound with gentle care. She winced, but did not pull away. "You're not gone," he said quietly. "Not to me." She stared at their joined hands, trembling. "Every man who's touched me in the last 3 years has had keys on their belt." He didn't flinch. "Except you." The fire light flickered in her eyes, and suddenly the dam broke. Tears rolled down her cheeks, silent but unrelenting. Her other hand came up, covered his. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. "I don't know why I'm—" "You don't have to be sorry for bleeding," Darius said. "Not here." Evelyn sobbed once, then again, and still he didn't let go. That was the moment. No promises, no confessions. Just a blacksmith's rough hands, steady and warm. A woman's grief too long buried, finally seen. And 2 wounded souls sitting quietly beneath the stars, no longer afraid of silence. "You're not going to the sheriff," Evelyn said firmly. Darius stood in the corner of the forge, gripping the journal, eyes dark with purpose. "He needs to know. He works for Rolst. They all do." Evelyn crossed the room, standing in front of him, her voice lowered. "Heat is the law here, Darius. You bring that journal in and it disappears before the ink dries, and so do we." A beat of silence. Darius stared at the journal, then at her. "To what do we do?" Evelyn hesitated. "Then we make him come to us." 2 days later, a notice appeared on the town board. "Cabin for sale. 12 acres water access. Quiet, available for viewing. Inquire at town hall." It was bait, and they knew it. Evelyn watched from a distance. Shawl pulled close around her face as Arston's assistant read the note. An hour later, word reached the mayor. By sunset, 2 strange men were seen heading up the mountain trail toward the old cabin. The fire started after midnight. Darius had been sleeping on the cot in the forge when the smoke reached him. He bolted upright, heart racing. The night sky above Duskwood glowed orange. "No," he muttered. He didn't hesitate. By the time he reached the cabin, it was already half consumed. Flames licked through the windows, devouring the roof, but Darius ran in anyway. Smoke seared his lungs, his eyes, but he made it to the hiding spot under the hearth, kicked open the loose plank, reached down. The journal was there, the letters, the map, the rickety box with the broken lock. He grabbed all of it and turned. The beam fell from above. They found him at dawn, face black with soot, arm cradling the charred rucksack like it was a newborn. "You damn fool," Evelyn whispered, wiping blood from his forehead. He gave her a faint smile. "Got what we need." 3 days later, the town gathered in the courthouse for the Falland auction. Mayor Rustin presided as always, confident, immaculate, smiling, until Evelyn Bellamy walked through the double doors. Gasps, murmurs. A man dropped his hat. She wore a faded blue dress and bruises hidden beneath sleeves. Her hair was pinned back like the girl she used to be, but her voice clear, steady. "My name is Evelyn Bellamy," she said, stepping onto the floor. "And this land you are auctioning was stolen." The mayor froze somewhere. Darius, his arm in a sling, stood near the back, heart pounding. Evelyn pulled out the journal. "This contains letters, maps, deeds proving Mayor Rustin falsified ownership of the Bellamy estate, that he locked me away under false claims of insanity, that he murdered my mother." Gasps turned to shouts. A man near the window stood up, furious. "You've got no proof." "I do." She opened the journal, held up a page with the mayor's personal seal. Arston stepped down from the podium. "You ungrateful little." He reached into his coat and drew a pistol. "No!" Darius yelled, breaking from the crowd. Evelyn stood frozen. The gun rose. A shot rang out, but Evelyn did not fall. Dara's did. He collapsed forward, blood blooming across his shoulder. Screams erupted. Someone tackled the mayor. Others shouted for the doctor. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside Darius, her hands trembling as she pressed cloth to the wound. "You idiot," she whispered. "Why did you do that?" His voice was a rasp, but full of that same quiet steadiness. "Because I would do it again. The doctor said it was a clean shot. In and out, no bone shattered." But Darius had lost too much blood. He spent 2 days in and out of fever, eyes fluttering, lips dry. Evelyn never left his side. She sponged his forehead, read quietly from the newspaper, changed the dressing with trembling hands. Each time his breathing hitched, her heart stopped. Each time he stirred, whispering her name, she touched his hand and whispered back, "You're here." On the third night, as twilight settled over Duskwood and the lantern cast soft gold across the room, Darius opened his eyes fully. "You stayed," he murmured. Evelyn smiled through tears. "Of course I did." He tried to sit up. She pressed him gently back down. "I thought you'd run," he whispered. Her lips trembled. "I thought I would too. I always ran from pain, from fear, from everything." She took his hand, her voice barely more than a breath. "But then I finally had someone worth staying for." Their eyes met. He reached up, calloused fingers brushing a tear from her cheek. They didn't need words after that. He pulled her close. Their lips met, hesitant, then sure. It wasn't a kiss of rescue. It was a kiss off recognition. The trial reopened within the week. Evelyn stood tall in court now, with her name fully restored. "Miss Evelyn Bellamy," the judge declared. The journal, the letters, and the map proved irrefutable. Her father's land deeds, her mother's medical records, even a confession from a former town clerk, all aligned. The mayor was arrested on charges of fraud, unlawful imprisonment, attempted murder, and corruption. But just before he was led away, he turned to Evelyn and smiled, a twisted, smug curl of his lips. "I'm not going alone," he muttered. They pulled him from the courthouse steps, but his words lingered like a curse. Outside the courthouse, the air was fresh with early spring wind. Evelyn stepped down the stairs and found Darius waiting. His arm was still bound in a sling, but he stood straight. He offered her his left hand. She took it without hesitation. "So," he said, voice soft, "you got your name back?" Evelyn looked up at him, tears glinting. "I didn't just get my name back. I got my life." He smiled. "You gave me mine, too." A year had passed since the bullet and the trial, since the fire and the courtroom silence, since Darius had carried her in his arms, broken but unafraid, and she'd decided never to run again. The cabin on the ridge no longer stood in shadows. Sunlight now filtered through polished windows, illuminating the warm wood walls that no longer smelled of dust or fear. The floor, once sealed to hide lies, now bore rugs stitched by hand, laughter echoing above the planks that once held silence. It was called the Bellamy home. A quiet sign above the entrance read, "For women who deserve to be heard, not hidden." Darius still worked his forge each morning, the ring of hammer on steel echoing through the valley. His workshop stood just beyond the orchard where Evelyn had planted lilacs, her mother's favorite. Children played near the well. Women came and went, some bruised, some silent, some with nothing but the clothes on their backs. They left stronger. Evelyn kept the books, made tea, listened, and when someone cried, she never asked for an explanation. She only sat close, offered warmth, and let them know, "You're not alone." One afternoon, as she was folding linens by the porch, a small voice piped up behind her. "Excuse me, miss." Evelyn turned. A girl no older than 6 stood barefoot in the dust hair and messy braids. She held a ragged doll. "I had a mama," the girl said. "She's gone now." Evelyn knelt. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Would you like to stay here a while?" The girl nodded. Then after a pause, she asked, "Can I call you Mama too?" Evelyn didn't answer. She only opened her arms. The child stepped into them, and Evelyn held her like her own soul had come home. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, jump across the yard. Darius watched. He didn't say a word, but that night, while Evelyn rocked the girl to sleep, he pulled out his carving knife, and on the oak door frame of the cabin above the latch, he etched her name, Evelyn Bellamy. Not as property, as legacy, as home. The next morning, a rider came up the trail, a stranger in a long duster coat. He paused at the gate looking at the sign above the cabin. He dismounted and approached Evelyn, who was sweeping the porch. "Ma'am," he said, removing his hat. "I heard stories." "What kind of stories?" she asked, cautious but calm. "They say this place used to be cursed," he said. "That a woman was locked up in there, shackled like an animal." Lucas looked at the porch, then at the soft swing Darius had built, now swaying with the breeze. Inside, a kettle whistled. Laughter drifted from a nearby window. She smiled. "No," she said. "This isn't where she was imprisoned." The stranger blinked. "This is where she was finally free." And that was the story of he bought an old cabin for 50 cents, then found a shackled bride hidden beneath the hay. A tale of shadows turned into sanctuary, of a woman once erased who reclaimed her name, and of a man who never asked for love but quietly became its strongest guardian. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that healing is possible, that strength can be gentle, and that even the darkest places can carry light, then do us a kindness. Tap that hype button to show your love and subscribe to Legends of the Wild West love stories for more unforgettable journeys through love, grit, and redemption under the wide open sky. Until next time, partner, keep the fire burning.